So this is the response to ignorance is bliss. Because as a statement, ignorance is bliss, it's totally false. Totally 100% false. My brother used an example. He said, well, how about there's like some guy he's in the middle of a war, but he's in the basement. He doesn't know that the war exists. Well, because he's in the basement, his ignorance of the war equals bliss. Well, that's actually, I mean, if you want to say in a very relative statement, very small exception and a relative statement, you can say that the ignorance of the war means that the war will not intrude upon the current level of bliss that he's having. Okay, yeah, that's fine. But ignorance is bliss as a universal statement is 100% false. Let's examine the three words. Ignorance is bliss. So you have ignorance, or the opposite is understanding. So you have the opposite of understanding or awareness of, which, the opposite of those is ignorance. And so is bliss. Bliss is like the high level of joy or happiness. You're having a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. So then you say ignorance, which means not understanding, is bliss. Okay, so let's say that, there's three key words there. Ignorance is bliss. So how about we say that how about we just reverse it? Okay, so understanding is bliss. And let's make it a universal, basically. Because we're only talking about three things. So let's talk about bliss itself. Understanding is bliss. So when we understand the mechanics of bliss, or happiness, or joy, when we understand this, then we can actually have access to those different levels, all the way from 0 to 10 of happiness, joy, and bliss. So if we understand bliss, that's actually where all bliss comes from, essentially. If you don't understand how to be blissful, you're not going to be blissful. If you're 100% ignorant of bliss, guess what? You're basically going to have a zero amount of bliss. Unless someone ties you down and injects you with morphine, then you might have a little bliss. But it's going to be temporary. And so you have ignorance, like people are saying that bliss is built upon ignorance. Well, it's actually not, because if you're totally ignorant of the mechanics of happiness, then you're never going to achieve bliss, because bliss is the high level of happiness. And so ignorance is actually proportional to non-bliss, I would say. Well, let's look at it an easier way. So bliss, actually forget that. Let's understand this. Understanding is the foundation for all bliss, all of it. If you don't understand how to eat and drink food and water, if you don't understand how to keep yourself alive, guess what? You're not going to be blissful, because you're not going to be alive. So that's level one. Level one of understanding equals you're alive, which is the capacity or the ability to have bliss within being alive, which requires understanding how to consume food and how to get water in your system. So then level one, guess what? You've achieved it of bliss, if you want to put it that way. So then we start building upward. How am I going to be successful in business? How am I going to be successful with my friends? How am I going to be successful with myself, which all my successes hinge upon? How am I going to be successful in a whole bunch of areas of my life with working out? How am I going to be successful with the three legs of my physical well-being, which is sleeping right, eating right, and exercising right? How am I going to be successful with myself as a whole? Once you start understanding all this, understanding at each single level actually increases the happiness and bliss of the individual. Ignorance of all that means zero bliss. That's actually what it means. It means you get none, zero. Ignorance is bliss is totally false. 100% false, because all bliss is built upon understanding at every single level. And so a lot of people want to say ignorance is bliss. Well, I don't think they're truly processing what they're saying. They don't understand it. They don't have the capacity to really understand what is going on when they use this language.